Before we go further on energy transfer in ecosystem, there are several things need to be understood in the ecosystem. In ecosystem, particularly biotic, there is structure of organisms that known as trophic level. The trophic level consists two major groups such as producer and consumer. Producer, also known as autotroph, which define as organisms that receive energy from inorganic materials, or from sunlight and used it as food. Consumer is organism that received energy by consuming another organism, and it also known as heterotroph. There are two type producer process such as photosynthesis and chemosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a process used by plants and other organisms to convert light energy into chemical energy that can later be released to fuel the organism's activities. This chemical energy is stored in carbohydrate molecules, such as sugars, which are synthesized from carbon dioxide and water. Most plants, most algae, and cyanobacteria perform photosynthesis. Such organisms are called photoautotrophs. Photosynthesis is largely responsible for producing and maintaining the oxygen content of the Earth atmosphere, and supplies most of the energy necessary for life on Earth. Chemosynthesis is the biological conversion of one or more carbon-containing molecules and nutrients into organic matter using the oxidation of inorganic compounds such as hydrogen gas, hydrogen sulfide, or ferrous ions as a source of energy, rather than sunlight, as in photosynthesis. Chemoautotrophs, organisms that obtain carbon from carbon dioxide through chemosynthesis, are phylogenetically diverse, but also groups that include conspicuous or biogeochemically important taxa include the sulfur-oxidizing gamma and epsilon proteobacteria, the Aquifaceae, the methanogenic archaea, and the neutrophilic iron-oxidizing bacteria. Example of producer in the trophic level such as plant. In aquatic environment, producer mostly represent by phytoplankton. Consumer in the trophic level can be separated into primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer. A primary consumer is an organism that feeds on producers. Primary consumers are usually herbivores that feed on autotrophic plants, which produce their own food through photosynthesis. Several other feeding strategies are also used by primary consumers. Algivores feed on photosynthetic algae, frugivores feed on the fruiting bodies of plants, nectarivores feed on plant nectar, folivores feed on leaf material, granivores feed on grains and seeds, while fungivores feed on heterotrophic fungi such as mushrooms. Many primary consumers adopt several different feeding strategies in order to maximize the effectiveness of foraging behavior. Primary consumers exist in all biomes and fill a wide variety of niches. They can range from microscopic organisms such as zooplankton to animals as big as elephants. Secondary consumer is any organism that consumes or feeds largely on primary consumers, as well as autotrophs. Secondary consumers can be broken into two groups, omnivores and carnivores. Omnivores can eat both plants and animals. Carnivores eat exclusively meat. A tertiary consumer is an animal that obtains its nutrition by eating primary consumers and secondary consumers. Usually tertiary consumers are carnivorous predators, although they may also be omnivores, which are animals that feed on both meat and plant material. Tertiary consumers often occupy the top trophic level, and so are predated by no other animals. In this case they are called apex predators. However, when they die, their bodies will be consumed by scavengers and decomposers. The trophic level can be described into food chain as well. Food chain, defined in ecology as the sequence of transfers of matter and energy in the form of food from organism to organism. Every living thing from one-celled algae to giant blue whales needs food to survive. Each food chain is a possible pathway that energy and nutrients can follow through the ecosystem. For example, phytoplankton produces its own food from sunlight. A zooplankton eats the phytoplankton. Anchovy eats the zooplankton. Anchovy eat by tuna and tuna consumed by killer whale. When the killer whale dies, bacteria break down its body, returning it to the soil where it provides nutrients for plants like grass. Of course, Many different aquatic animals eat phytoplankton, and zooplankton can eat other plants besides single phytoplankton species. Anchovy, in turn, can eat many types of animals and plants. Each of these living things can be a part of multiple food chains. All of the interconnected and overlapping food chains in an ecosystem make up a food web. A food web consists of all the food chains in a single ecosystem. Each living thing in an ecosystem is part of multiple food chains.